Hello and welcome, I'm Tim and this is TimBatSea. In this video we're going to retrieve our barge. We're down on the Arthur Hills. The left hand side is Staten Island, the right hand side is Carteret, New Jersey. And we're just coming by this big white building over there. It is a paper recycling plant. And we have to come down here and pick up our barge, get it underway. So you can see that ship that's there in the straight ahead of that ship is in downriver of our barge. Our barge is going to be at like an angle. It's not going to be at 90 degrees to the river here, the Kills. It's going to be more at an angle, and you'll see. So we're going to have to go down and turn up into it to get into the notch. Right now we're taking a look at this buoy right here, looking for tide to see what the tide is showing, if it's showing any tide on the buoy. And as you can see, we're right about at slack water right now. So as long as we don't take too much time, we ought to be able to make up out of this thing, get underway, and head north in the AK. And I think at this point we're going to anchor and then go into our dock for a little bit of maintenance on the barge while we're waiting for orders. Anyone that's new to the channel, I want to welcome you. Longtime viewers, welcome to you as well. We're doing this sort of thing for a little while now. We're doing a little different with voiceovers and trying to be a little bit more compliant for industry standards. One of them is that we want the camera kind of outside, and all the commentary and that sort of thing to happen after the job was done. The hill over here on the left hand side is on the Fresh Hills. That's a landfill. Sadly, a lot of that was built up as they recovered the remains of a lot of people and a lot of the building materials of the World Trade Center. When they had to barge that stuff out of there, they brought it over here. They have a little flag that's always lit up over there, a memorial for them. So we're just talking to the barge now, making sure that it's all good to come around. They're going to be out there ready for us. Still trying to look for telltale signs, because the angle of the barge is such that if there is a little bit of tide running one way or the other, it's going to mess me up getting into the notch. It's not a big deal. You just kind of go clunk, clunk, clunk and wake up the people off watch. So it's trying to be a little easy here. Come around here, you can see there's another barge on the other side of this finger pier. This is our barge right here. Those yellow things that stick down, we refer to those as goalposts. And what they do is they're designed to help you keep from, when the barge is light like this, you have a tendency, especially when a ferry weight goes by, to roll in underneath the rake, and it puts a big dent in the bow. But these goalposts keep you straight right in there, because what happens is you roll up against the goalpost, and the rubber will hold you right there. Now I have this camera set up on the starboard side of the wheelhouse, outside, and so you're not going to see us dead on right there where the crucifix is. We call that bit right there in the middle of the notch of the barge. We call that a crucifix. Fix. Boy, can't get it out this morning. Bit. So they're putting up a headline right now, and we've talked about this in other videos, but it bears mentioning again. We basically have three different types of lines that hold us in push gear. The first one is this headline, and the headline, there's a couple different theories here. I don't subscribe to this, but some people will put up what we call a handy line, or just a little light tie-up line to hold you in the notch so that it's easy to put up the left and right legs of the push gear. I have unfortunately been on boats that have broken their push gear, and when that happens, you need to stay in the notch or you'll flip over if you don't. And that's happened to me before, and the only thing that kept us in the notch was the safeties, which we'll talk about in a second, and a really substantial headline. So it's my policy to always use one of the biggest lines we have right there on the head, and that holds us there. While we're in push gear, it really shouldn't do anything. If the push gear ever slips, the brake band slips on the winch, or the push gear breaks, which does happen, we'll be very happy to have that push gear, that headline there. The next thing that we have that we'll be putting up right now is they start to put up the port leg of the push gear, and I think in this particular one we had moved this barge when it was loaded, so we had to reset how we have the lines wrapped up on the bits on the back, because it's a two-part piece. It comes off of the ship's stern, goes up to the barge, and comes back to us. And when the barge is light, it's so much higher in the air, it needs more push gear out. When it's loaded, we need to take that slack up. And so we do that by taking a couple turns on the aft bits that we tie it to. So I think they're resetting that right now. There are some people that have a policy of always doing the outboard side first. Like in other words, the outboard side on this one, and we're kind of sticking out the ends. I don't really know if there is an outboard side, but if there would be, it would be on the starboard side in this case. My thing is that these, I'm familiar with these 4200s, and they all have a closed chock in the center of the deck. And with the double drum winches, the winch that we set the wire up on, that we put hooked to the push gear, is on the starboard side. So by putting up the port side first, if the wire comes tight, it doesn't get the shackle and the thimble and all that stuck on that center closed chock. If we put up the starboard side first, that tends to happen. So that's my own personal preference. So everybody, just because I do it my way doesn't mean it's the only way. And that's something that's kind of, hopefully that's something that's going away as time goes by. There's a lot of old school tugboat guys that say, there's only one way to do things, it's the right way, and the right way is the way I do it, and everyone else is wrong. I think that was the way years ago. Certainly was, that was the way when I was breaking in. But as time went by, I think you become much more efficient, realizing that people are individuals, and for example, the way I do things is very much different than the way my mate Luke does things. And I don't think that Luke does anything that, if I saw something that I thought was, that strayed from the company policy, or might be dangerous, or increase the odds of doing something bad, then I would argue that point with him, or tell him not to do that. But most of this stuff is, I like to do it this way, he likes to do it that way, and at the end of the day, if everything's still safe on both ends and everybody's happy, we tend to do things better our way than doing it a way that, there's a reason why we all don't do it the same way. Everybody is built to do things differently. I'm rambling on. I hope that makes sense to you guys. I subscribe to the management philosophy that we are individuals and everybody can do something. If you've got a good way of doing it, you don't need to change it to do it my good way as well, unless there's an issue of safety or company policy. But anyway, they are now, I think, what you can't see that's happening, and I do this only because I specifically remember this. When we pass the push gear up, it's really important because of the loads and forces that are involved. The line can't be twisted or touching itself, because if it does, it'll chafe. And in this particular thing, when they passed the line up and they pulled it, it was flipped over. So we've had to take it down and flip it 180 degrees, put it back on bits, and so that we won't, when we tighten it up, it won't get it won't be a chafing hazard. And chafing's a really big deal. So what's the deal with the push gear? I believe I don't know if it's each leg or a set, but I think with $30,000. So I heard that years ago, so I don't know what it is now. But Spectra line is very, very expensive, and it's very strong, and it's awesome. Anybody who ever did push gear with the old wire legs push gear, and intermediates and all that, oh, it sucks so bad. So we love the Spectra. But the one thing that Spectra doesn't do well is it doesn't stand up to chafe at all. So we have to put chafe gear around high chafe areas, like around the bits and where it bends over the barge, where it bends over the rail. It's not the rail, the stern cone. And so we have really heavy, it's kind of like almost fire hose that goes around it. It's not fire hose, it's special stuff made for it to chafe. But chafe is something that we're always fighting. And like I say, I don't believe that most push gear fails because it's been used too much. Most push gear seems to fail because a little bit of chafe started. It's kind of like that rust, Once it starts, it's going to start going. And the line becomes weaker, and of course more and more things are going to happen at that point. So it's a disaster. But anyway, they're getting it. I'm trying to fill this whole time up with this. Oh, there we go. It looks like I'm moving now. So one of the disadvantages of not holding the camera is that you don't get to see what's happening down there. I apologize for that. I think we should have one more week on this tug that I'm on now, which is our loaner tug, before we'll take our time off to have our time off. And that's when hopefully Chris, Lita, and I will be headed down to Florida. We're doing a 1,000-mile run on our sailboat. If that's something you want to see, put a link in the description. We have another sailing channel over there, and it's like sailing channel. So if that's something that interests you at all, we'd love to have you follow along, help us grow that channel. Anyway, so now I'm cranking up on the winch, and we're basically making the barge and tug one to the extent that we can. And then the next thing they're going to do is start putting the safeties up. And the safeties are another series of, in this case, it's wire and great big heavy ship line that goes down on either side of the bow. And the idea for the safeties is that if imagine this barge is loaded with 2.2 million gallons of product, and we're going 8 knots down the river, and for one reason or another, the push gear breaks. Well, the first problem I'm going to have is that I'm not going to be able to. I have to immediately take the engine out of gear that the push gear is broken on. So if the starboard push gear broke, I immediately have to put that starboard engine in neutral. Because the Spectra doesn't float, it's going to fall down under it, and it's going to get tangled up in the propeller. And now we've had a really bad situation get multiple times worse. And so I immediately have to put one engine in neutral until they retrieve that line back on deck. And then once that happens, I'm going to be trying to take the energy out of the barge, and we do that by backing. So I'll be backing. Most of that backing will come off of the headline that I put up. But those safeties keep me from going to one side or the other. In other words, it keeps me relatively square in the notch. It's not really square, but the problem without any of this stuff is if you just had two push gear that were connected to the stern, and a push gear broke and I fell out of the notch, the side that would not be broken would pull on the barge. So in other words, if our starboard push gear broke, our bow and we had it, I went all stop so I wouldn't get line in the starboard engine. The bow would want to relax in the notch because I'm not pushing as hard anymore. And if it popped out of the notch because something broke the push gear, so there's probably a big wake or a swell or a wave or whatever, and the bow would come from left to right. And the reason why it would do that is because the push here on the port side or the left side would be tight, pulling my stern around. And if we're still doing 8 knots, as soon as I got broadside to that 8 knots of water, that would just grab that, that 8 knots of water would grab the keel of the tug and it would roll us right over just like in less than a few seconds. So the safeties are there to keep us so that we never go sideways and get that rolling potential in there. And they also help with backing down and taking the energy out of the barge. Excuse me. All right, so right now I think we're we're letting lines go up in the bow. I hope that's what we're doing at any rate. Seems like you guys have been watching for a long time without a whole lot of stuff going on here. But in this particular case, by now, I'm starting to feel that the ebb tide has started to happen. So what that means is that as I back out of this slip, the current coming from the river, coming from Newark Bay down the Arthur Kills, is going to push on the starboard side of the barge and the starboard side of the tug and push me from right to left. And if you remember, there was that big ship that's down there on the left-hand side. So when it's time to go, I want to come out of here as fast as I can and put some distance between us and the ship and the dock, so that when I get pushed down, I won't be alongside that ship, or at least I'll safely have it far enough off for that. So in this case, you say, well, do you let the lines go from the bow or do you let the lines go from the stern? In this case, I have one engine working ahead. I've communicated with them, and they have a line up by that forward Yokohama, where the Yokohamas are the fenders, and that's right up there in the bow. And they have a spring line that I'm working into up there. Then I gave them instructions to let all the other lines go, and then once they get all set, and they're all set, and they have a man on the dock that's ready to let that last line go, I'll go all stop, which will relieve the pressure on that line. They'll take that line in, and I'll use both engines to come back as fast as I can to try to get, because remember, I've told you that this boat, because it doesn't have port nozzles and whatever, this boat doesn't back anything like our boat normally does. But even if this were our boat, I'd want to back up really quickly as well, just to get out into the stream and be away from potential hazards. The further I'm away from everything, and the further the closer I am to the middle of the channel, but the odds of a successful sailing are better. So that's what we want to do. So that's all we're trying to do is control the odds. We're not controlling them. Use them to our advantage. So they're letting lines go, and remember, there's a guy on the dock that is a dockman that is walking back and forth between all these. These barges are over, bigger than a football field, so there's a walking that goes on, sort of thing. So the chief's going up there to supervise. A lot of people that will comment on how our tugs look or how they're equipped or the years of our tugs or the power or whatever. And the equipment that you use is very nice, and especially because we live here more than half of our lives. So it's nice to live in nice places. Having said all that, your crew, who you surround yourself with as a crew, is so much more important than the boat that you're on. You might hear me and Luke griping, this is not the boat that we're used to. We miss our old boat. We can't wait to go back to our old boat. And all of that is true, and there's nothing wrong with this boat. In fact, I think that if we didn't have the history on our boat, we would love this boat even more. But the big thing is that I'm still surrounded by the same core group of our crew that we normally have, and that makes everything worthwhile. And this is a good example of it. We got a whole bunch of people that don't need to be up on the barge, but they're up there to see if they can help out, because you always want to help your brothers out. It's really, really kind of cool. I don't think that's just something that's here. I think that's really industry-wide. Sometimes I see in comments when I used to have and believe me, I'm doing everything I can to bring this back. I keep saying this every hitch, but or every video, but I'm telling you, the radio traffic, will come back to these videos. It's coming. I just can't do it on this boat. I've tried a couple times and failed. But when we get back on our boat, we'll do that. And I've had a lot of people in the comments say, boy, when you talk to other companies, it seems like all you guys, all the tugboats are just so respectful of each other. And it's kind of cool, because I think that there are some companies that might compete. There's product that needs to be moved, and everybody bids on who gets the job or the contract or whatever. And there's some healthy competition there for sure. But I think, and I don't mean this is not black and white, but in a broad sense, I think most of us that have been out here for a while realize that we're all brother mariners, and it really doesn't matter what company we work for, because it's a small industry, and just because I might pass you one day in the kills, and 2 years later you and I might be working on the same boat at a different company somewhere. That happens a lot more than you'd think it does. So it's kind of cool. It seems as though there are people in this industry that have a reputation of being less than friendly or cooperative, and everybody in the industry knows about that. Nobody wants to work on their boats and that sort of stuff. And then there are other people that are a joy to work with, and everybody knows them, not just at one company, but all over everywhere. And that's something that's really cool about this industry. Like I say, we're all brother mariners. It's something that something that I'm very proud of to be a part of. Okay, so hopefully these guys, it seems like they're taking forever to do this, but hopefully they're getting this thing more and more tied up, untied. And you're going to see me when I do this. We call this black stacking. That's where I put the controls full astern. Those, even though they're all computer controlled, the fuel rails will be wide open. So I really need to get some way on this thing. But I think you're going to see, if I remember this job correctly, you're going to see that I noticed a problem when I start backing. But I don't want to get too far ahead of ourselves here. This particular load was something called, I think it's called Accolade or something like that. Alclade. I think that's what it's called. I have no idea what it is. And you know what? Having said this, I probably should have Googled it to check it out. But I just saw that on the orders, and I was like, what is that? So I'm sure that there's going to be a tankerman down here. My old buddy Paul. Paul is awesome. He watches these silly videos. But Paul, if you're out there, or any other tankerman that knows what this is, maybe you could write us a description in the comments of what this is. I've often said that a lot of us think that gasoline just comes out of the ground, or that you get crude oil and turn it into gasoline, but I think it's made up of 7 or 8 different components. Maybe this is one of those components. Maybe I know there's RBOB and PBOB and ethanol and benzene and all this other wonderful stuff. Okay, so now they're starting to work on these lines back here. So I'm starting to think that we're making progress. So right now, all the lines in the bow should be off except for that one that I'm pushing into right now. And remember, I'm pushing into it because as I push into it, if the stern started to come off, I would give a little bit of right wheel, and that would push the stern right up against the dock again. If the bow started to come off a little bit, I give it a little bit of left wheel, but the bow's never going to come off because that forward line is at an angle, and that by me pushing on that line, it's bringing the bow over to the left anyway. So as long as I'm pushing on that, that's not going to happen. So that's why we do that. Like I say, we leave one engine in gear so there aren't shock loads on the lines or changing anything. The dynamics of the barge everything should be exactly the same while they're working on the lines until the last line. They'll tell me last line, and then I'll stop, and then they'll see that the pressure is released on that one line, and they'll take it in. They'll let me know when it. So right now they're probably doing that right now. So okay, and I'm seeing things shaking. So I'm thinking that yep, here I go. I'm backing down, and there goes. You can see I'm black stacking it right now. We got 4,200 horsepower hooked up all the way. We are backing up as much as I can now. If you look straight ahead on the barge, you see that mast up there. I'm looking at that mast and looking at those tanks, and it kind of feels like the mast is going from left to right a little bit. And that would make sense, because if the tide is ebbing, it's grabbing the stern of the tugboat and pushing the stern from right to left, which is going to push the bow from left to right. I think I said that was the first time. But anyway, so the way I counter that is I keep that port engine hooked up astern. I give myself about 20 degrees of left wheel, and I come ahead just a little bit, and I gave it a good shot there, just to stop that swing, and that holds. So I'm coming ahead on the starboard engine, just half or so, and I'm hooked up astern on the port engine with about 20 degrees of wheel. Now they say I'm past the dock, so I've put the rudder midship. I've got both engines hooked up astern to try to distance myself from falling down, because the tide is going to want to push me laterally from right to left. So I'm flying out of the dock, and you can see it's still black stacking there as I'm adjusting throttles, trying to get it flying out here. And you're going to probably see, I don't know if it's going to come onto the camera, if it's going to be in the frame or not, but the ship should be showing up on the left-hand side here pretty soon. But I'm backing up, and it doesn't seem like I'm going that fast. You can see me adjusting the engines. And the new computer-controlled engines are really good. When the unlike a gasoline engine, where a gasoline engine will actually have a throttle that opens a butterfly. That's not how it works with the diesel. The diesel will go and add more fuel, and when you do that, the combustion rates change, and so you get some carbon that blows by. And the newer Tier 4 engines and stuff like that smoke hardly at all. And when I give them this, I'm asking the utmost that they can ever be asked for, going from dead stop to hooked up, and full load on them, 100% load on them, and it will smoke like that for just about 2 or 3 seconds before the computer figures it out and makes all that go away. So it's pretty impressive. So now as we're coming around, like I say, I wanted to come out of that hole really quickly. I wanted to get away from that ship. Fortunately, we didn't see that ship on the left-hand side, and that's because we were far enough away. I think when I did that, I was doing about 5.2 knots astern, which, if you know anything about these types of boats, it's coming back at a good clip. And so I knew that I'd be able to stop that, because, like I say, this thing doesn't back nearly as well as it goes ahead, and I'd stop it by going ahead, and it's a light barge, so not a big issue. This guy up here, right on the left-hand side, he and I had talked before, and he said that he was going to go by to his dock, and I could come by him. I said, no problem. And then this other company up here, right ahead of us, was a really helpful guy this particular trip. He was making security calls, and every time he'd line up something with somebody that they were going to make passing arrangements, he would let them know that I was right behind him, and that what worked for him should work for me as well. And I really appreciated that. That's kind of cool. There's that picture. There's on the right-hand side. You can see that's the paper plant that I was talking about. And we're headed up for Trimley Point up here, and then eventually up to Bay Ridge. But thank you guys so much for watching. I think we're getting close to the end of the video here, but I just want to thank you so much. And if these are something that you like, you can support us. We'd really like that. There's a link for if you want to become a patron. That's cool. And we'd love to see you on SV Paquita. So the link for that down below too. You guys take care, be safe, and as always, I'll see you on the